Okay, good evening, everybody. I'm going to get started, and some people may be dropping in a little bit later. Welcome. Thank you for taking your time out of the week to join us. We have a nice program tonight on irritable bowel syndrome. My name is RENU SINHA. I'm one of the founders of Healing Spokane. We're a group of healthcare providers that are passionate about wellness and using complementary approaches with traditional medical therapy. Our mission is to provide an unbiased, scientifically based approach to healthcare disorders for the public and healthcare providers. And our goal through education and collaboration, we hope to create a new paradigm to how health is approached in our community. Sometimes we're inundated, especially with Dr. Google, internet information, that it's difficult to tell what is correct, what's not. Some things can be just poorly studied, or there's not enough evidence, and sometimes it's just pure marketing. So the National Institutes of Health has a program called the National Center for Complementary and Integrative Health, which helps to delineate what is truthful and what may be just biased information or marketing. And that institute actually provides a balanced scientific approach, not always useful in some regards because complementary therapies are hard to study, as you know. But they look at multiple research trials and experience throughout the world as well. So it does give us good information as to what we can use for ourselves or pass on to our patients or providers. We hope to provide you with accepted, unbiased information that you can explore with your primary care physician or your loved ones. An obligatory disclaimer, we are not here to diagnose, treat an individual. Our state medical board would kill us if we start doing that. And we're here just purely for education. So I hope you appreciate that. Tonight's topic is very relevant since 1 in 5 Americans have irritable bowel syndrome, and mostly between the ages of 20 and 40, and predominance of women will have this syndrome. So what is IBS? It's abdominal pain or discomfort associated with bloating and changes in bowel patterns that lasts over 6 months. So it can be a chronic problem. IBS is thought to be aggravated by stress, certain foods, alcohol, and large meals. So those big meals at the fast food places, not a good idea. So what causes IBS? Exact cause is unknown, but it's a functional disorder. By that, I mean the colon and intestines they work abnormally, but structurally they're fine. So sometimes testing will show, hey, you have a normal GI system. Well, it's not working correctly. And so irritable bowel syndrome, by definition, is a functional problem. Current thinking points to possible mechanisms such as food allergies or sensitivities, brain-gut signals, or what we call neurotransmitters, also GI motility, so how fast things move through the GI system, intestinal sensitivity to pain. So pain is different for people, as we know, and that may be part of the issue. Infection or small bowel bacterial overgrowth. And we didn't think a lot about this before, but we have more and more research showing that this is something that we need to be thinking about. And of course, genetics, so it can be passed along. All right? So how do we as medical doctors diagnose irritable bowel syndrome? And there are 4 types or subtypes of irritable bowel syndrome depending on constipation, diarrhea, mixed, or unsubcategorized. And the physicians or primary care providers will order tests and further workup based on your history. So they'll ask you a bunch of questions to help figure out what part of IBS you have, so then a treatment plan can be developed. Okay, so Also with the testing, we got to make sure that you don't have something serious like a tumor or a serious food allergy, gluten allergy, things like that. So what is conventional therapy? There is really no cure for irritable bowel syndrome, but it's just symptom control. And you can really have good results, 75-80% effective improvement in your symptoms by just supportive care with a focus on healthy lifestyle, which we all could use, diet changes, and consistent nutrition. What am I saying when I say consistent nutrition? And Corinne will probably expand upon this, but eating regularly, eating good foods, not, oh, I got to run, I got to skip breakfast, and I got to pop a donut in my mouth or something. We do eliminate certain foods, common allergens, and then encourage a low FODMAP diet, which Corinne will talk about later. Encourage hydration, fiber supplements to keep things moving. Probiotics are pretty useful. Coated peppermint oil or antispasmodics to kind of soothe the cramps that some people get or bloating. Managing stress with multiple techniques. Antibiotics, sometimes short-term antibiotics, if you have an infection, can be useful as well. Prescription medications, there are several that are approved by the FDA, but they're only used for severe cases. They have some side effects, as you can imagine, so hold those off. So what other health problems can patients with IBS have? And you might not think about it this way. You might think, oh, I just have IBS. But chronic fatigue, malnutrition, anxiety, if your stomach's hurting all the time and then you're sitting in a room and I can hear, like you can hear my stomach growling or whatever, that makes me more anxious. Then I start, so it's a domino effect. So things like that can happen. Acid reflux and depression. So these are some of the things that are associated with IBS. So we have to look at that as providers that we're addressing all those issues. So that's the background on IBS. So tonight we will have 6 different approaches on irritable bowel syndrome, and you'll notice some overlap and some differences because every field approaches IBS a little bit differently, just like other disorders, but you'll also see there's some commonality between what we're saying. And we appreciate that there's nothing that's a quick fix. We all want like, hey, can you give me that pill to get rid of whatever? There's work. But with consistent effort, the symptoms will improve and your mind-body connection will improve as well. So we hope to work together so we can help obtain better results for the patients. So after the presentations, there'll be a panel discussion and opportunity for question and answers, and I'd like you to hold off all your questions until then. We're going to start off with the naturopathic approach with Alicia Policani. Alicia?
Hi, thanks for coming out tonight. So as I've been introduced, I'm Dr. Alicia Policani, and let's talk about a naturopathic approach. So I feel in regards to IBS and everything that I treat that probably my most important assessment tool is taking a good patient history. Because answering these 3 questions can, a lot of times lead you to what's causing the issue. So, for example, when did your symptoms begin? Well, if they came on after a trip to Mexico, we're going to go looking for a parasite. If after 3 rounds of antibiotics for a sinus infection that wouldn't go away, well, then that gets us looking in other directions. Or, for example, if you developed IBS after a really messy divorce, well, then we're going to be looking at more, emotional and stress factors. So the answer to these 3 questions, like I said, are a very, very important tool of assessment and can help to lead me into deeper evaluation to try to figure out what's causing the problem. So food intolerances or allergies are always going to be the first place that I look. And if you tell me I've had these symptoms since I was a kid, that's probably going to be, like I said, the very first place I look, because most issues with kids are their diet and what they're eating. There's many, many, many different ways to assess for food intolerances. All of them have their value. The immune system can react to things in many different ways, so really there's no perfect test. Other than if you take the food away and your symptoms go away and you add the food back in and your symptoms come back, well, that's going to be the most accurate test. Elimination and challenge really is the gold standard. It doesn't matter how you come to that, either through a good diet diary sometimes can be your best tool, or through a blood test. Either way, the proof's in the pudding. So the thing is about eliminating foods is that the unfortunate side effect is that narrows your diet. And then you eat certain foods all the time because you can't eat gluten or dairy or what have you. The problem is that then, because another thing that goes along with IBS is leaky gut syndrome, which I'll talk more about in a second, is that then you can develop further intolerances. If you're eating the same, almonds day in and day out, well, then you can develop an intolerance to almonds. And it's because a lot of the issues behind irritable bowel syndrome cause inflammation. And that inflammation over time actually can break down the glue that holds the gut cells together. And as a result of that, if we look at your gut under a microscope, it looks like a colander. So these food proteins that should not be getting out and interacting with the immune system are. So you could see how if you're eating almonds every single day and they're interacting with the immune system, well, then you can develop an intolerance. So the goal is to work on healing the gut and repairing that, so then hopefully down the road you can get those foods back. Now, sometimes you're never going to get them back. Obviously, if you're a celiac, you're never going to get it back, but gluten back. But that's always the long-term goal, because a lot of times you're reacting to these foods because of other imbalances going on as far as diet, lifestyle, stress, and actually your microbiome. Okay, which we're going to talk further about. So your microbiome is the bacterial system of your gut, and they've been doing this huge microbiome study over the past 10 years trying to figure out all the little bugs and what they do. Now, we know they regulate our immune system, our hormones, and our nervous system. They're very, very important. And they are another thing that I assess when looking at irritable bowel, because if there's an imbalance in your normal flora, and that could be either an overgrowth of good guys or an overgrowth of yeast, which should be in the large intestine, and certain medications can cause it to overgrow, or you picked up a parasite or SIBO, which we'll talk in more detail. When you've got those imbalances going on, you could see how they could cause inflammation and changes in your stools, correct? So the problem with dysbiosis is that we can actually, well, a lot of it is diet. We actually can influence the type of bacteria we have in our gut by what we're eating. They've done studies finding that literally one meal at McDonald's can change the kind of bacteria you have in your gut, and not to be down on McDonald's, or I'm just sorry, I should say fast food in general. But medications are another big one. So antibiotics, okay? Antibiotics not only wipe out what's causing the sinus infection, but they wipe out all of those, similar type of bacteria in the gut. And things like, say, yeast or what have you, or other types of bacteria that are not sensitive to that, then you've killed off all their competition. They're allowed to overgrow, and they cause imbalances that trigger the symptoms. So antibiotics are a big one. Steroids are another one. Acid blocking medications like Prilosec, that's another big one that causes a lot of imbalances. Pain meds, especially if you're using them over time. So those are medications that can lead to these imbalances. So, sorry, we're throwing a lot of acronyms at you tonight. So SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. In studies that were done for the FDA, looking at certain medications to treat this, they found that irritable bowel syndrome type D, which is with diarrhea, 85% of the time was due to SIBO. And they actually did studies on GIs returning from Afghanistan and other places, and what was really interesting about this was that they found that there wasn't a positive correlation between being in battle and IBS. So we think, oh my gosh, could you think of a worse stress than that? The correlation was with food poisoning. So a small intestinal bacterial overgrowth is typically, it's actually bacteria that live in the large intestine, and they've overgrown into the small. And they've been allowed to do that because the cleaning waves that go through the small intestine 3 to 4 times an hour have stopped. So, in the case of food poisoning, what's happened is that the bacteria that cause the food poisoning, they have a similar protein to the nerves in what's called your migrating motor complexes. And those are little things that get the motion going in the small intestine. So the immune system started out attacking the bacteria, and then it went after those little neurons, and that stops the motion. And then if you think of it like the ocean, where you're standing on the beach and the waves are knocking you back, well, that's what the motion in the small intestine is doing to the bacteria in the large. And when that stops, they're like, okay, here we go, party time. So that's one of the major things. There's a lot of other things that can lead to that. Pain meds, because they stop motility. Low stomach acid because of taking a medication like Prilosec. So there's actually an acid gradient, starting with the most acidity being in the stomach and running all the way through the small intestine to the large, and that keeps our bacteria in check. And so when you're on a medication that blocks acid, you take that control away, and then that can lead to problems. So okay, so I'm sorry, I already went over the causes of SIBO. There's many more than that, which, we don't need to get into tonight, but treatment of SIBO. So the treatment of SIBO basically involves starving them, okay? They're fermenters. They like to eat foods that are fermentable, and that's one of the biggest issues with irritable bowel is that we have this bloating that occurs, and then that stretches the intestinal wall and triggers a lot of pain and spasm, which is why the low FODMAP diet is helpful, which we'll get to in a sec. So treatment of SIBO involves starving them, and different practitioners will use different diets. I prefer the low FODMAP diet. And either either conventional antibiotics or herbal antibiotics to kill them off. And both are equally effective. They've done a lot of studies looking at both. So low FODMAP, as you can see, fermentable oligosaccharides, disaccharides, monosaccharides, and polyols, okay? So that's basically the components in the food that the bacteria like to eat, and then when they eat it, they ferment, they cause gas production, bloating, and we have the irritable bowel symptom. So a low FODMAP diet, our diet is a diet that's free of those foods. So one of the biggest, highest FODMAP foods is going to be garlic and onions, unfortunately, which we all eat a ton of. Or if you're trying to do sugar-free and you're doing like xylitol, erythritol, maltitol, those are big ones too. So you think you're doing yourself good and you're just causing yourself more issues. So this is my preferred, but there's different diets that you can use to starve it out. But why this one is so helpful is because you get rid of the fermentation, so you don't have the bloating and the gas and the pain. Okay, so healing the gut through diet and prebiotic foods. We're not going to get into treatment, but suffice it to say, there's so much you can do to heal your gut just through your dietary choices. So you can choose specific foods that are very healing to the gut and prebiotic foods that actually encourage the growth of the good bacteria. You want to feed the good guys what they like to eat, so then they'll grow. And then as they start to come back and, start doing their job again and start regulating the processes that they're supposed to be regulating in your gut and forcing out the bad guys, then you start to feel better, okay? So in regards to probiotics, that's kind of a interesting topic right now. The microbiome study has been showing, for the most part, that probiotics are not useful. And a lot of it has to do with that they don't make it through the stomach acid. And then when they do, they don't colonize within your large intestine. And I don't know if a lot of it has to do with the quality of the probiotics that they're studying or just probiotics in their own right. But, there's a lot of stuff on the market that isn't very helpful for you. A lot of it isn't alive. It doesn't have the number of bacteria it says it should or in the amounts or type that it should. But probiotics, they can be helpful. You can use certain probiotics to try to get a certain effect. And a lot of people do feel better on the probiotic. But as soon as they stop it, a lot of times their symptoms come back. And that's because they're not setting up permanent shop in your gut. That's where diet and the prebiotic foods come in. You got to encourage the growth of your good bacteria. So then they're going to be what sticks around. But probiotics can be very helpful in the short term to help you with your symptoms. Okay. So that's basically a naturopathic approach to treating irritable bowel, and there's a lot more to it, and we're going to get into that.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Corinne Fotheringham, who is going to give us the nutritional approach. So we all have to take notes on what Corinne says, and the first slide will kill you. I'm just warning you.
Thank you for that warning. So let me go ahead. All right. So there's a lot of stuff on this slide. There we go. Is that better? So thank you. I just want to say thank you for having me here today. I'm very happy to be a part of this group and provide the dietary support to the mystery that is IBS. So as Dr. Policani talked about briefly, this is a low FODMAP diet. This is a handout that I created that I use with the patients that I work with in order to really encourage a lot of whole foods and dietary changes, and to very quickly go over a lot of the low FODMAP food options that there are. So as you can see here on this, sort of see, the low FODMAP food list is on the right. So these are all foods that are low in those short chain carbohydrates and sugar alcohols that are FODMAPs. So all of these foods are considered on the low list, and some of them have actual measurements to them because they contain a little bit of FODMAP. So as long as we consume smaller quantities, it tends not to be bothersome. So an example of that could be like 4 slices of beetroot that I have under the vegetable category. There's some other ones too, like legumes, 1 cup of edamame or a half a cup of drained, rinsed canned lentils. Those are just some examples. What I do want to talk about is on the left-hand side, you can see that there are the high FODMAP compounds. So if we break these down into different food groups, we can talk about them in terms of the compounds that they come in. The first being lactose. So that's the food group that is primarily in dairy. We're all familiar with lactose being in dairy. So a low FODMAP diet is actually low in dairy. And this is one of the reasons why I really encourage folks that are looking into a low FODMAP diet to work with a healthcare practitioner or a dietitian to ensure that there aren't any other results that could happen from following a low FODMAP diet, such as low calcium intake. So a lot of people get their calcium from dairy sources, and if they're all of a sudden cutting out those dairy sources, then they need to find out where else they can get that calcium from. So the first one, like I said, is lactose. And the mechanism of action of how it causes issues in those with IBS is it actually increases the gas and bloating that causes pain. And then also it acts as sort of an attractant to water. So it brings water into the digestive system, and it prevents the stool from really solidifying in the lower small intestine and the colon. So that's what leads to the most common type of IBS being predominantly diarrhea. So by limiting that, we can really help a lot of people. The second group there is fructose. Fructose, the mechanism of action there is that, once again, it attracts water, so it prevents the stool from firming up. And fructose is commonly found in fruit and vegetables. So a lot of fruits that are high in fructose specifically are watermelon, apples, cherries. I hear a lot of times patients come in and they're sensitive to mango or cherries. Those are the big ones in watermelon. Small amounts may be okay, but really limiting those for the first part of the low FODMAP diet can be really helpful. The third category are fructans and galacto-oligosaccharides. These are pretty ubiquitous in a lot of different food groups. There's a long list there. Mainly the ones that Dr. Policani also mentioned were the onion and garlic. That's in a lot of processed foods, a lot of cultural foods that folks love to eat and they grew up on. These molecules are very, very highly concentrated in onion and garlic. So even a small amount of that can really be a huge trigger for those with IBS. Some other ones are banana, grapefruit, cashews, and pistachios are also really high. So those are oftentimes very limited, if not just people with IBS can't eat those at all. And then the last group are the polyols. So these are the sugar alcohols, and a lot of issues that I see with the sugar alcohols are mostly from food additives in different processed foods. So Dr. Pelicani mentioned the xylitol, also mannitol and isomalt or sorbitol. So those are sugar alcohols that are used to sweeten things that are lower in calories. So that's why the food industry loves them. But they tend not to be all that helpful because they do draw in water once again and lead to diarrhea. So that goes over those different food groups. I also wanted to touch on the fact that this low FODMAP diet can be really helpful for the majority of people with IBS because it reduces the triggers. But it doesn't, these FODMAP foods that I talked about don't create IBS. It's not the cause of IBS, right? So this is just a way to reduce symptoms. These foods are inherently, they're not bad foods. They're really great foods for our bodies. And a lot of them actually contain some of those prebiotic compounds that Dr. Pelicani mentioned that feed our good gut bacteria. But they're feeding the gut bacteria in the wrong place, or the gut bacteria have already there's the overgrowth, right? So it's managing this this condition with a low FODMAP diet at first. The treatment period is usually 5 to 12 weeks, depending on the person. Some people might see results as soon as 3 to 5 weeks after being on a low FODMAP diet. Others really need a greater length of time to see results, and others it may not really work at all. If it doesn't work at all for them, then there's absolutely no point on being on a low FODMAP diet, and we can work on other strategies such as the consistency of food intake. So those large meals can be really, really taxing on our digestive system. Our gut doesn't really know what to do with all that food. So having small, frequent meals throughout the day can be really helpful for some people. And the last thing that I wanted to focus on is that there was a review published last year in Clinical and Experimental Gastroenterology Journal, and it looked at a lot of studies looking at low FODMAP and its correlation to helping folks with IBS. It is very clear in the research that a low FODMAP diet can produce a reduction in symptoms associated with IBS, but we're not exactly sure on the long-term consequences of a low FODMAP diet if people are eating low FODMAP foods for 3 months, 6 months, 12 months. We don't really know how that affects the bacteria in our gut long term. So we just continue to study that and get more research so that we can have a better idea. And I think that kind of sums up what I wanted to talk about. So I will pass it on to the next group. Oh, I think I addressed a lot of these already. Let's see. So some of the pros I've already talked about: improving symptoms, and that the likelihood of this diet will significantly improve quality of life for folks that struggle with IBS. The cons is that it can be really restrictive for some people. And sometimes actually I've had patients that come in and they're just so frustrated. They feel like they can't eat anything without it leading to some sort of symptom. And so actually giving them this list, this handout of low FODMAP foods to try, it can be really, it gives them a sense of freedom that they have these safe foods that they can eat. So sometimes it actually isn't very restrictive for people because they feel comfort in knowing that these foods are okay. And other times it's harder for folks to make that adjustment. So it really just depends on the person. Social gatherings and eating out can be challenging depending on where you go. A lot of times I recommend, if people are on the low FODMAP diet in the strict phase, then they eat beforehand, or they bring something maybe to a potluck that they feel like they can eat without having a reaction to. But I do think that it's important to look at this food list and realize that these are foods that you can eat, and there are plenty of foods out there. We can have variety. We can still enjoy a lot of things, but each person's going to react to things differently, and it's all about working with a healthcare professional that knows the ins and outs of this so that you can discover what is best for your own body.
Thank you. All right. Now the brains of it all, the psychotherapy approach.
So first, a disclaimer. Whenever I'm at these things and people mention psychotherapy, if you're referred to a psychologist, it's not all in your head. So when you refer to a psychologist, it's not because people think that this doesn't exist for you. It's because you actually have a mind. We're used to thinking of the mind as housed exclusively in this organ called the brain, but your mind is actually distributed throughout your body and extends socially. And you actually have more nerves in your gut running up to your head than you do vice versa. So your gut is actually informing a lot of what's going on inside your head. My role as a psychologist in treating IBS would be as a complementary or supportive role, and primarily to help you reduce the stress response in your body. And so we have 3 particular treatments that have really good empirical support for treating IBS. The first one is cognitive behavioral therapy. The second one is hypnotherapy, specifically for IBS. And the third one is mindfulness therapy. So I'll go over those briefly, and then I'll talk about what they have in common and what we think may be the mechanism of action for those. So cognitive behavioral therapy is the one that's been researched the most. Doesn't mean it's any better than or different than, it is different than other therapy approaches, but it doesn't mean that it's any better than other approaches. It's just that CBT is easier to study. Because it tends to be more standardized, it tends to be lend itself well to outcome measures, and so it's easier then to study than, say, a psychodynamic therapy. But any supportive, caring relationship is going to help you in terms of managing these symptoms. But in CBT, the general strategy is to, most of us don't have any training in how to interact with this thing called the mind, which is really bizarre when you think about it, because your mind is more powerful than any supercomputer on the planet, at least for another year or so, until Google figures out AI. But for right now, we're all walking around with a supercomputer inside our head. No one ever taught you how to deal with that. And so the first part of CBT is just psychoeducation. So helping you delineate between what is a feeling, and by feeling I mean what's a physical sensation inside the body. And we use words sloppy in the English language, so we use thoughts and feelings and emotions as if they mean the same thing, and they don't. And so first step is to educate patients about what are feelings and how are they different than, say, thoughts. And then how are feelings and thoughts different than emotions? So emotions are a combination of your physical sensation, feelings, plus your thoughts, plus the context in which all of that is unfolding. So for example, physiologically speaking, there isn't much difference between excitement or fear or worry. But so there isn't much difference between, say, going on a roller coaster, excitement, and then going through a haunted house, fear. They are the same physiologically. The only thing that's different is the context and how you approach the thoughts that go along with that. So thoughts and feelings and thoughts, and then emotions, and then also behaviors then that you engage in. And so we get, my role is to help guide you into separating out those component parts. Now, once you can take a look at those component parts, now we have more handles to help you with different situations. And so what seems to be something that comes out of the blue, an IBS attack, now we can start to say, is there particular situations in which this happens? Yes. What are the thoughts that go along with those situations? What are the feelings that you notice in those situations? How do those contribute to different thoughts? What are the emotions then that you're feeling? Because your gut is intimately tied to your stress response. And most of us live in a very stressful culture. And there's a wonderful book by Robert Sapolsky called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. And if you have IBS, you should pick up a copy of the book because it will educate you about the stress response. But your gut is intimately tied to that stress response. So CBT will educate you about all of that. Hypnotherapy does something similar, but slightly different. So there's a psychoeducation process in hypnotherapy. But then we're going to take advantage of something that you naturally all have experienced, which is you've all experienced a mild hypnotic state at some point. Some of you might be experiencing it right now. But if you've ever driven from Seattle back to Spokane, you for sure have entered a hypnotic state at some point where you get into that flat land and there's nothing going on and there's nothing you can do about it, and you will disappear from your conscious mind for a while, and then all of a sudden you'll snap back to it and you'll think, oh my gosh, where have I been? I'm so lucky I didn't get in an accident. Actually, you were fully present. You had you had a part of your brain that was very concentrated on a particular stimulus, which is the road, and then the other 98% of your brain was off gallivanting somewhere else. But we can take advantage of that in hypnotherapy, that very concentrated attention with a particular part of the brain, and then a relaxation response that it's paired with. So hypnotherapy, first we educate people about the process of hypnosis, then we guide them into this deep relaxed state. Then we're going to take advantage of that very pinpoint sort of concentration. We're going to put it in the gut. And we're going to just use healing sort of imagery about how you relate to your gut, so that when you think about your gut, you're not getting these anxious, stressful sort of reactions in the gut. When you're thinking about your gut, you're able to soothe the gut with these different tools and imageries. And then we'll start to pair that with post-hypnotic suggestions for challenging situations that you've had before, social situations and those type of things that have triggered the fear response in you before. So that's how the hypnosis for IBS works. There's two particular protocols that are out there. They're very similar in terms of duration, 8 to 12 sessions or so. One is the Manchester protocol. The other one's the North Carolina protocol. If you wanted to Google those things, you could probably find a PDF about them on the internet. I don't know, I'm just guessing. And then mindfulness. So mindfulness is similar too in terms of, once again, we're going to take advantage of training your attention and concentration. What we mean by attention is actually 3 different cognitive skills that are interrelated. And the best way to understand how these are interrelated is, imagine that we're in a completely dark room, and so pitch black. And I have a little keychain flashlight. And the moment that I push the keychain flashlight, if I'm shining at the floor, the moment that I push the keychain flashlight, you would instantaneously become aware, roughly, of the size of the room, your position in the room, the general clutter of the room. All of that would be calculated instantaneously. So that vagueness, that vague big picture is awareness. Now, within that field of awareness, if I start to move the beam around the room, wherever the beam lands most brightly, that is what we would call attention. And so for some people, their attention is bouncing very quickly all over from one object to another. So that awareness and attention, then we have concentration, the ability to take that attention and hold it on an object of focus. Now, mindfulness trains us in all those things, awareness, attention, and concentration. And it allows you to shift where your focus is, so that when in IBS, most people get too focused on what their gut is doing. And then they start to overinterpret natural variations that are happening in the gut. So if I'm sitting in the auditorium and my gut rumbles, I know most of you can't hear that. But someone with IBS might think everybody can hear that. And then they start worrying about, people are going to know that that my stomach is rumbling. Then they're going to start thinking about, if my stomach's rumbling, then that might mean something bad is about to come out, right? And so then they might start panicking and looking for the exits. And all of that is working up their stress response. But it's because their attention is focused on that one particular set of stimuli. And so mindfulness is about how to change that, how to allow them to see where their attention is, and then shift that over time. And so all 3 of these empirically validated treatments share the same rough variables. So we're going to educate you about how the mind works. Then we're going to give you different tools and strategies for how to harness the attention and concentration about the mind. And then we're going to use all of that to help you strengthen your relaxation response, dampen down your stress-related response. And that's how psychotherapy helps with IBS. So there's nothing magical about psychotherapy in terms of IBS, and it's not in your mind, but it can be helpful in helping out the other interventions that the doctors up here are talking about today.
Thank you. Fascinating. So now all the Western approaches have gone on. Now go Eastern. Okay. Dr. Pamela Langenderfer is a
so good.
name. Is a naturopath and also a licensed acupuncture specialist, and she's going to talk about Chinese medicine's approach to IBS.
So Chinese medicine is deeply rooted in tradition. And if you look at Chinese medicine, it's over 4,000 years old. And Chinese medicine encompasses things like acupuncture, exercises such as Qigong, and diet. And diet is a big part of that. And one of the things that is very different from a Chinese approach is that Chinese medicine encompasses all these things when we're looking at somebody with IBS, and we take a much different view of it. And I think I really had this ingrained into my mind when I was a student. And part of that was from one of my doctors, Dr. Zhang. He had just moved to the United States, and I was a first-year student in the Chinese medicine program. And I never forget him coming up to me because I was eating carrots and I was eating a salad, and he was just looking at me going, "What are you doing? What are you doing to your gut?" He was in shock that somebody in this culture would eat raw carrots and salad. And I was like, "What are you talking about? I'm healthy. I'm naturopath. I'm eating my raw foods, and this is what you're supposed to be doing." And it wasn't until one of our classes, we had a mentoring class at his house, and his wife would cook for us each week. So we got to experience the traditional cuisine. And that's when I really started to learn about just how a diet was looked at so much different. And so what he went on to explain to me is that in Chinese medicine, your digestive system is often referred to as your middle burner. And one of the pictures I always have in my mind is that in your middle burner, you have like a little cauldron and you have this fire going. And this fire is at like a little boil, and there's a little simmer going on. And every time you're eating food, it comes in and it's getting broken down, and your body's digesting it and it's utilizing it for nutrition. Well, when you eat a lot of raw food and a lot of cold food, it puts that digestive fire out, and it starts to stagnate, and you start to see more bloating, and you start to see people have a lot more issues with feeling like food is sitting heavy in their stomach. And when we would go over to their house to eat, we never ate salad. We never ate raw food. And there was always 2 to 3 vegetable dishes, but they were always steamed. And there was always meat, but it was a small amount of meat, and it was easy to digest. There were lots of soups. There were lots of broths. It was probably the first time I ever saw fish head soup and had these eyeballs staring back at me. So that really became the premise for a lot of our treatment when people came in with digestive issues. Is one of the very first pieces of advice was actually to get people off of any type of raw food or salad because their system was just too weak. And if somebody, even though a raw carrot might have more nutrition than a cooked carrot, if that person's digestive system is so incredibly weak, they're just not able to break it down. And they do much better having things steamed or as broths. So when we would put some of the dietary advice into place, and then when we would do acupuncture along with that, people seem to see more improvement quickly. And oftentimes within a week of just doing some of those simple diet changes, they would notice that they have a lot less bloating because things were just easier for them to digest. If you also look at traditional cuisines, there's a lot of ginger that's used, and ginger is one of the main tonics for the digestive system. And it helps to break down food. It has some anti-inflammatory properties to it. And so that's why it's so helpful to include that into whatever you're eating. The other thing was always making sure that there was other herbs along with that. So sometimes you would see fennel. Sometimes things got a little bit spicy. I'm a little bit of a wimp, so I can't eat very spicy food at all. But all those things are to create more movement in the digestive system, and you're basically getting more blood flow into that area. Acupuncture is also something that's really helpful for IBS, and actually probably is the thing that has the most research behind it. And when I think about acupuncture, I think everyone always is still trying to figure out how does it work? Like, what is the exact mechanism behind it? And I don't really think there's a good answer for that. But what I do think is pretty neat with acupuncture is that now that we have things like MRI machines, we can see that different parts of the brain become more active. When we have, we can measure different cortisol levels in the blood. We can measure that there's endorphins. So you can see that it's doing something to the body. And when I think about the whole mind-body connection as well, acupuncture is really helpful for reducing stress levels. And when somebody has a lot of digestive issues going on, oftentimes that person is very stressed. They're on the go all the time. And acupuncture is a way for them to just slow down, take a break. Oftentimes people take a nap and just help to reset themselves. So the next time you go to sit down to eat, I encourage you to really think about first how you feel after you eat, because that was the very first thing when I think back to Dr. Zhang and what he put into my mind. I thought the first thing I thought was, wow, I'm not crazy. I do feel worse after I eat salad. And it really isn't probably that great for me at this point in my life. And second, really listening to your body and knowing that what you put into it is giving you direct feedback back. And if you don't feel well from something, to really listen to that, because we're all individual and we're all different genetically, and what might be right for me is not necessarily going to be right for you.
Thank you. Now I don't think I have to speak at all, because that's exactly what Ayurveda believes. Okay, so I'm just going to touch on Ayurveda. I might skip a slide here in a minute. It's a 5,000-year-old, so I'm 1,000 year older than you. Traditional health system of India, which is considered holistic by the National Institutes of Health. And the basic tenets are each person is unique, so no one size fits all. Okay. And the GI system, and in particular, the digestion is the key. So if your digestion is balanced, you will be feeling well. You'll feel great. If your digestion is weak or hurt or impacted or infected or what have you, you will have IBS or whatever. And if you continue to have a weak digestion or you just blow it off, you're going to have disease. So disease is a manifestation of long-standing poor digestion. We seem to understand it in Western medicine as the, leaky gut, microbiome, things like that. The Eastern philosophy is similar. They didn't know all the bacteria and this, and that. Maybe they did, but they called it something else. But we're figuring it out now. Like Chinese medicine, treat the root of the problem. Focus on the digestion, and the mind, body, spirit has to be balanced. And we don't always look at it that way, but that's the reality. So the basic point is balance between the digestive fire, and that is a big deal in Ayurveda. If you have an appropriate fire, ability to digest something, now you can have too much fire and you can burn into your tissues and things. And then if you keep that going, like burning yourself, like candle to both ends or whatever, you can burn your whole body out. Okay. So you have to have just the right amount of fire so you don't build toxins. And those are some of the things. I like that little goo. I thought, oh, that's it. But those are the things that sometimes we think about with leaky gut. Those are undigested materials, and they're going to hurt your body. Okay? So in order to understand some of this, and I'm not going to go into too much detail, but we all have a certain percentage of air energy, earth, and fire energy. In particular, the air type people are thinner, they move around a lot, they're really susceptible to changes in stress. I should have a picture of somebody in the room in here. She's laughing, I can tell. But they're susceptible to certain things like constipation with IBS. And they're very susceptible to stress. It seems like they have a nerve that goes right from their tummy, brain, back and forth, okay? They're constantly in motion. The earth people, dominantly earth people, will have, with IBS, will have more mucousy problems, bloating, just not feeling well, fatigue. The fire people that are dominant or imbalanced, I should say, will have acid reflux and diarrhea. Okay, and they can have a lot of pain as well. So depending on what constitutional type you are, and you can do your own dosha quiz, or see an Ayurvedic specialist, and they can help you with that. You're at a perfect balance here. that you can go this way towards the air or this way towards the earth and vice versa. And with the symptoms that you have with IBS, you can almost figure out what you have and then kind of go work backwards and say, carrots, no good, but steamed, maybe, or bok choy, maybe it's good. So I'm just going to give you some tips. So lifestyle, feel your emotions, or like Dr. Smitham said, work through some of those mindfulness, cognitive behavioral therapy, hypnotherapy. See, I was listening to all of that stuff that you were talking about. Slow down with an exclamation. It's hard to do. We always have something we're late for, but try to slow down. It's still going to be there, whatever it is you're supposed to do. Establish a daily self-care, very important. Yoga and meditation to start off in the morning and maybe to end the day in the morning, so you're not awake trying to fall asleep at 10 o'clock. Sleep routine is very important. Having regular meals and not watching TV or reading or multitasking when you're eating. Just kind of focus on, wow, this is delicious or whatever. Gentle exercise is good. You don't really need to be doing jumping jacks and all this other stuff. As far as diet, similar to what Pamela said, cooked, warm, moist food, in particular fresh fruit and vegetables. And you can look at the low FODMAP diet and kind of see what works for you. And, it's in moderation, and I think Corinne was truthful about that you don't say, oh, I can't have that. I can't have that. Unless you have a true allergy, some of these things are sensitivities or just, something you have to look at. 3 to 5 small meals per day are better than one giant meal. And also Ayurveda says that bigger meal should be at lunch, not a huge meal at dinner, because think about it, it makes sense. You only have a few hours to digest it at dinner before you go to bed. But at lunchtime, you're awake, sun's out, hopefully, and you have more time to digest the food. Interestingly, Ayurveda puts in a plug for buttermilk. Now, I don't know if we have the same buttermilk here as we do in Asia, but you notice there's not Greek, fruity, 25 grams of sugar yogurt on that, right? Yogurts are not created the same unless it's a thin version without all the sugary stuff that we don't want in it. So buttermilk with the bacteria it's a prebiotic food. You'll notice in Asian food, there's always a fermented little food with your meals too. So it isn't like you have to say, okay, now I got to eat the sauerkraut. Now I got to drink this buttermilk thing. But it's useful. Ginger with lime tea is good. Encouraging things in the kitchen: fennel, cumin, coriander, which is cilantro. It's a seed of the cilantro plant. Cinnamon to stimulate the appetite. Psyllium husk or methyl cellulose, whatever you prefer. Avoid caffeine and alcohol. In general, those, whether you have the excess air, excess earth, or fire, you can kind of figure it out. And the internet is great to help you sort it out, but you're not going to be able to do it all by yourself. You have to get some help from your primary care provider. So I hope you can use the wisdom of Ayurveda to achieve perfect wellness and health with the balance of mind, body, and spirit. So next, we've saved best person for last, which will be Anna Molgard, and she's going to do a very interactive yoga and meditation segment. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here tonight. Do I have to grab the little slide? Thank you. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about yoga therapy. That may be something that's new to you. This is the definition of yoga therapy by the International Association of Yoga Therapists. It's an accredited organization that accredits the training programs of yoga therapy. It says yoga therapy is the process of empowering individuals to progress toward improved health and well-being through the application of the teachings and practices of yoga. So yoga is also thousands of year old tradition, and yoga therapy is now emerging to study the effects and impacts of these old ancient practices and how they impact the body. So in yoga therapy, we define these 3 functions of the digestive system. The first is transformation, when something comes in the body. And in the yogic perspective, we're not only looking at the food that's coming in the body, but actually all of the experiences, things that we're learning, things that we're experiencing, our emotions. So all of these need to be digested, okay? So we have the process of transformation. Then we have the process of assimilation, when that is taken into the structure of the body, and then what things are actually eliminated. And so there's that 3-part process, and there's different aspects of the yogic practices that will actually help to facilitate each of those functions. From the yogic view of IBS, we draw a lot from Ayurveda too, in addition to the elements, but we look at this state as either being hyperactive state, where there's excess acid production and motility, the rapid digestion, or the hypoactive state where it's sluggish and slow. We have deficient acid production, decreased motility, and slow digestion. And in the practice and the tradition of yoga, we're always trying to bring the body back into balance. So we want this regulation of our digestive system and really all the systems of the body. So it's about bringing the body back into balance. So how yoga can help specifically with IBS, it can help to regulate and bring into balance the hyperactive or the hyper or hypoactive states of digestion. It also helps to support the parasympathetic nervous system. Just like we were talking about earlier with some of the psychotherapy techniques, yoga helps to regulate that nervous system. The body's designed to live in the parasympathetic state, that peaceful response. And our stress state is designed to be temporary. So yoga teaches us through physical practices of movement and breathing, and even our meditation practices, how to bring the body back into a more regulated parasympathetic state. And it also helps to increase the neuroplasticity. We talked about that a little earlier as well, about being able to have the connections of the neurons to be more rapid and more connected when there's dysregulation in our neurological responses. So we are going to do some yoga practice together. How does that sound? We've been sitting and listening for a while. So we're going to start with some breathing and some hand gestures. Teaching mudras and hand gestures is part of my training and tradition in my yoga therapy school. So we're going to learn some that are specific to help with IBS and digestion, okay? So the first gesture is called Kubera Mudra, and you take your thumb and you touch the tips of the index finger and the middle finger to the thumb, and then you tuck the other fingers in. And you'll actually hold this with both hands. And if you have hyperactive digestion, if you have more acid, then turn the palms of the hands down. If you have more sluggish digestion, then turn the palms of the hands up. Having palms down calms the body. Having palms up brings a little more energy in, okay? And then we're going to learn a breath called Kaki Pranayam. We'll make the mouth into the shape of an O, okay? And we'll inhale through the nose while we hold the gesture. And then we exhale long and slow out the mouth. And if you'd like, you can close your eyes. Let's do that 5 times. Inhale and exhale. Good. In and out. In and out. 2 more breaths. In last one on your own. And you can just hold here and notice the effects of those 2 very simple practices on your body, your mind, and your spirit. And then whenever you feel ready, you can allow those eyes to gently open. So being able to slowly extend and lengthen the exhale really helps to facilitate the engagement of the parasympathetic nervous system. Also, breathing in through the nose and exhaling out through the mouth can help to regulate our vagus nerve, which is that communication that we were talking about between the stomach and the brain. We have this talking back and forth. So it actually vibrates. The breath will vibrate the vagus nerve and help to calm and regulate that. There's been a lot of studies on polyvagal theory, and it's pretty cool. All right, so now let's talk a little bit about some yoga postures that can help with our digestion. We're going to do this seated, so I'm going to move my chair forward. And we'll do this together. I'm going to invite you to kind of scoot forward as far as you can on your seat. Okay, and again, hands can rest gently on the lap. And I'm going to set, well, I think I can do this with the microphone. This will be interesting. We're going to start by circling the body. So it's as if the body is stirring a big pot of soup, okay? And the movements can be slow. And we want to keep the seat anchored into the chair. We talked about one of the effects of IBS is that decreased motility, that ability to move. So we're giving the body some help here, okay? Now we're going to circle the body the other direction. And notice if this movement feels a little sticky or if it feels kind of fluid and free. Good. Let's do one more circle. And then we'll come back to center and just notice how you feel. You can even close the eyes. We practice checking in our yoga practice so we notice what's happening. Cultivating that mindfulness, that awareness that we talked about earlier. All right, now we're going to move into a cat-cow movement. This is one of the standards. We do this a lot in our yoga. We'll inhale, we draw the chest forward, shoulders come back, and chin lifts up. And then we exhale, hands can wrap around those knees. We round the back, tuck the chin, and draw in. Good. Inhaling forward, arch the back, lift the chin, and exhaling back. As we coordinate breath with movement, that's again facilitating the regulation of our nervous system. Let's do 2 more sets. Inhale forward, and exhaling back. We're also massaging. Do you feel that? Down in the belly. Inhale forward. And exhale back. Good. And now we'll come to center. Take a deep breath in through the nose. Exhale slowly out the mouth. Good. All right. Another practice that's in Ayurveda and also in some yoga traditions is called Abhyanga. It's self-massage. We can actually use this idea to help facilitate and foster motility in the digestion. So we'll take a gesture that's called Matsya Mudra. I'll show you because this is 2 hands. Take the right hand, place the palm down, and then left hand rests on top. And this is the gesture of the fish. Okay, so it's like a swimming fish. And what we're going to do is, I'll just stand to show you. We're going to start on the right side of the body. You can actually stand up to do this together. It'll be a little easier for you to feel. And we'll start at the lower right quadrant. We take a deep breath in and we press gently into the body. We're following that flow of elimination. We trace up just below the rib cage, and then we press down. And we're linking that to the breath. Lift the hands away from the body, come over to the right. Inhale, press up and in. And then exhale, you can breathe out the mouth if you like that. More. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. And exhale. Back down. So that's a really calm, gentle practice that you can offer to yourself, especially when you're feeling a little stuck in your digestion, okay? Now we're going to do a little twisting exercise and a folding exercise, and then we'll do a meditation, and then we'll be done, okay? So again, we want to foster and facilitate the pathway of digestion. So we're going to do a little twist, and we'll talk about what's happening. So we'll inhale, reach the arms up. And we're going to exhale, turn to the left. I'll mirror you. We're going to turn to the left. Then we'll reach the hand in front towards the base of the chair, and the upper hand will come back behind, okay? And now we're going to breathe here. You'll notice that your right side is compressed and your left side is open. So just as we were following that path of digestion, in the practice of yoga, we have this idea that is called squeeze and soak. So we're restricting blood flow, we're restricting mobility in that right side as we're twisting. And then we're going to inhale, reach both arms up, and that side will open. And now we're soaking that area of the body with oxygen, blood. Good. Now we'll do the other side. So we'll turn, and then front hand reaches across, upper hand reaches back, and you'll notice now that we're restricting into that left side. We're squeezing there, and that right side is flowing and free and open. Good. We'll take 2 more breaths here. You can do the inhale through the nose and exhale out the mouth. Good. And then we'll inhale, reach both arms up. Feel all of that movement. And then we're going to do a gentle forward fold. We can place the elbows onto the upper legs. You can take another gesture that you touch the fingertips together. This is called Hakini Mudra. And you'll rest, dropping the head. If you have any issues with high blood pressure, keep the gaze forward. And you'll notice that we're offering a little bit of constriction here. We're folding in, right? Folding into the abdominal area. So we're causing a squeeze all along the full area of the abdomen. Take 2 more breaths here. And then we'll roll up slowly. If you have issues with spine, keep the spine long. Otherwise, you can go ahead and roll up 1 vertebra at a time. We'll inhale, draw the shoulders up to the ears. Exhale out the mouth. And just notice how you're feeling. Okay, so I'm going to teach you 2 other mudras that you can try, and then you'll choose the one that you like the best. And we'll do a little guided meditation that helps us track the pathway of digestion and helps us to foster a healthy relationship and with that pathway. So our first one, remember, was Kubera. So tips of the fingers touching here, palms up or palms down. Okay. This other one, these other ones are 2-handed, so I'll talk loud. So the other one is that you can tuck the 3 fingers in, okay, pinky finger, ring finger, middle finger. They'll touch. The knuckles will touch. And then the opposite thumbs will touch, and the opposite index fingers will touch. And you'll rest the hands right at the solar plexus, just below the rib cage here. And this helps us to connect with that anyi, that fire that we were talking about earlier of digestion. So close the eyes and just take 3 breaths and see if you like that gesture. It's called Achala Anyi Mudra. And then go ahead and release that gesture. Sometimes as we let it go, we can feel the effects a little more strongly. If you don't feel it, it's still happening. It's okay. Yeah, don't worry. And the last one is called Pushan. This one actually is specific for IBS. This is so you'll take your left hand. I'll mirror you. Thumb touches index finger, or ring finger, and middle finger. So like a little like ears, right? And then the right hand will touch first and middle finger here. Perfect. Good. This is Pushan. And again, palms up if you want to increase the digestive fire, palms down if you want to decrease. And just hold there for a few breaths. And then choose which one you like the best. Which of those three? And if you don't want to hold a gesture, that's fine. We'll do our meditation. Okay. So taking whichever gesture feels the most supportive to you tonight, you can allow the eyes to close or simply draw the gaze downward or soften the eyes. And we'll begin to notice our breath moving down into that area of the solar plexus, that traditional place of fire, digestion, and energy. And begin to feel a sense of warmth and nourishment, but it's gentle, supportive. And with each inhaling breath, feel that area expanding outward naturally. And with each exhaling breath, feeling that area soften and relax. Just feeling that rhythm. Taking several breaths to feel how this rhythmic movement of expansion and relaxation deeply massages this area of your body, supporting your digestive system and optimal functioning. Visualize your power of digestion as a golden glow that radiates out from the center of your solar plexus, bathing each of your digestive organs with vital energy. Begin by taking a few breaths to sense that golden glow, bathing the stomach, the area of transformation, with nourishing energy, enhancing its ability to break down food more efficiently. Visualizing and breathing now the process into the pancreas, that golden glow traveling down, assisting it in completing the process of breaking down food completely. Feeling full transformation. Now visualize your small intestine filled with golden energy, sensing the rhythmic movement that allows nutrients to be absorbed into your bloodstream. Assimilation. Next, your golden glow bathes your liver in nourishing vitality, allowing it to store nutrients and energy more efficiently while removing toxins from your bloodstream. Elimination. With digestion and absorption of nutrients functioning harmoniously, your golden glow now flows into your large intestine, completing the process of healthy digestion by eliminating waste products efficiently. With your entire digestive system functioning smoothly, take several breaths to sense this golden glow radiating throughout your entire being, providing you with the vitality to live fully and vibrantly. And if you choose, you're welcome to join me in stating an affirmation to complete this meditation. The affirmation is, I am nourished fully with vital energy. And you can say that out loud or just listen or say it in your mind 3 times. I am nourished fully with vital energy. I am nourished fully with vital energy. I am nourished fully with vital energy. And then you can slowly release the gesture, allowing yourself time to come back, slowly opening the eyes and closing our meditation together. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was great. I hope you guys, it's okay if you didn't feel, if it felt strange or something, but meditation is a practice. You keep practicing and it will work for you. It takes a village for us to put on these programs. I'd like to thank the speakers. Good job. And Healing Spokane members that are listed. And Dr. James Moore, who's gone. He's the Vice Chancellor of WSU. Thanks, and see you next time.